a last meal for Aileen Wuornos today. And her last meal was a cup of coffee, but I love baking, so I'm gonna do coffee white chocolate chip blondies for you. So when we're getting started, you wanna go ahead and preheat your oven to 350 degrees, okay? Now, I'm cheap and I just use throwaway pans. So if you have baking dishes at home, good for you, all right? If you do, go ahead and spray it, but I have a non-stick. This is like a last step, but we're gonna do it first. This recipe calls for pecans, and we're gonna do 3/4 of a cup. I love pecans, so I'm doing a full cup. And I'm gonna put them in here. And then when my oven is heated, I'm going to pop them in for about, I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes until they get kind of aromatic. You are going to need, in this little bowl, I have 1.5 cups of packed brown sugar, okay? Make sure you pack it down, because if you don't, you're not gonna have the right amount. And that's a little bit of flour, but don't worry about it. And then you need 1.5 sticks of butter. It can be salted or unsalted. I prefer salt, so. And then it's also, we've got a 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt, like regular salt in there. So you're gonna put that in this little pan thingy. Oh, and mine's already hot, so, because I want it to melt fast. And then you're just gonna let that melt down, combine together. Just let it do its thing. You can turn the heat down. While you're melting that, you are going to get another bowl. And in this bowl, we are gonna have 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour. And then you're also gonna put 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. Do not skip the baking powder. It's not gonna turn out right. You're gonna whisk that together just so it's combined. It's super easy, super quick, just like that. No biggie. And then we're just gonna nurse this and watch it come down. And once this is combined and all melted down together, you wanna take it off the heat and we're gonna let it cool for about 15 to 20 minutes, half hour if you want. And then that's where we're gonna add the coffee in after that point. So, this is gonna smell really good. It'll smell like Christmas in your house. So once this is cooled down, it's gonna look like this after you melt it all together. But you want this consistency with it cooled down, okay? Because if it's too hot, when we add the coffee, it's gonna separate and nothing's gonna go together. So, look at this, it's gorgeous. It is, so a blondie's like a brownie, but we're gonna have a different texture. Obviously, you can see it's kind of more gooey. When I was a kid, my dad and my mom would always use butterscotch. See, look at that. You can see the white chocolate chips, the pecans. It's a gorgeous color and I want to try it, so. Definitely want to get some milk, or I would even suggest, putting a dollop of ice cream on top. Whipped cream, whatever suits your fancy. This is delicious, and I hope that, you know, if this had actually been Eileen's last meal, she would have enjoyed it. So, thanks for watching, guys. Today I want to talk about Aileen Wuornos, okay? And if you've seen the movie Monster, it had Charlize Theron and Christina Ricci in it. That movie was based off of Aileen Wuornos, okay? Very good movie. If you've not seen it, I would suggest you watch it. Aileen was born Aileen Carol Pittman in Rochester, Michigan on the 26th of February in 1956. That would make her a Pisces, which hopefully my dad's watching this. My dad is also a Pisces, same birthday. Now, a little backstory about her mom. Her mom just kind of gives me not good vibes all around. Her name was Diane Wuornos, and she happened to have Aileen when she was just 16 years old. When Aileen was born, her dad was locked up. He was already in prison. He was gross. He was a messed up guy. He was disgusting. He was a very messed up individual, okay? He was just gross. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and he was convicted of raping a 7-year-old little girl. God, that's just, it's just gross. He actually committed suicide in prison on January 30th, 1969. And that takes me back to Diane. She did not want kids. She really didn't want to have children at all. It kind of seems like she just felt held back by them. She gave Aileen and Eileen's brother up when Aileen was 4 years old, and she sent them to live with Eileen's alcoholic grandparents. By the age of 11, Aileen was already engaging in sexual activities, mainly at school, and she would do that to exchange those type of acts for cigarettes. It was also known that she engaged in those activities with her own brother, her flesh and blood. Now, I don't know about you. I don't know how you feel about it. I think that's disgusting. Aileen claimed that her grandfather sexually assaulted and would beat her horrifically. There's actually like a documentary film that was done, and one of her childhood friends said that one day when they got home, Eileen's grandpa actually like sat Aileen over a chair and just beat her so bad with a belt. And her friend said she just remembers she was like put in a trance because it was just that bad. It was that awful. In 1970, Aileen fell pregnant, and she for a number of years was raped by a friend of her grandpa's. And it's actually been a rumor that he was the father of that baby. She gave birth to that little baby boy at a home for unwed mothers on March 23rd, 1971. The baby was placed with a family through adoption, thank God. And not too long after that, Aileen actually dropped out of school. Around the time that she dropped out of school, her grandma actually passed away due to liver failure. Because, like I said earlier, she was an alcoholic for many, many years. When Aileen was just 15, her grandpa actually ended up throwing her out of their house. He just didn't want to put up with her shit anymore, I guess. And she started supporting herself by hooking. And she actually lived in the woods behind their home. And in other interviews that people did, they kind of went to that area and they talked about, you know, she made these forts out of like trees and tarps and different things. Just basically anything that you could find. So I want to jump into her criminal life now because her childhood sucked. It just, nothing about it was good, you know, nothing to write home about. And it's just years of the same old story, you know, just an awful childhood. Not a good way for anybody to grow up. And I am sorry for the way that she grew up because I don't think any child deserves that. No child should be going through those types of things. No child should be seeing those types of things. I just think that Aileen was set up to fail from the time that she was born. And it makes me wonder if her family life had been different, you know, maybe if she had been put up for adoption and put in with an actual loving family, maybe she wouldn't have done all these things that we are going to talk about today. On May 27th, 1974, Aileen was arrested in Jefferson County in Colorado for a DUI, disorderly conduct, and firing a .22 caliber pistol from a moving vehicle. She was later charged with failure to appear on that. And in 1976, she actually hitchhiked to Florida, that's where most of our case is going to take place today. When she got to Florida, try to remember how young she is, okay? When she got there, she met a 69-year-old yacht club president, and his name was Louis Kratzfeld. Now, Aileen and Louis got married very fast, and Aileen continuously involved herself in confrontations at their local bar, and she went to jail briefly for an assault. She hit Fell with his own cane, to which he, no surprise, filed a restraining order against her. That was weeks within their marriage, okay? It was just a shit show. It was a crazy shit show. So after that happened, it kind of pushed her back to Michigan. On July 14th, 1976, she was arrested at a bar, and forgive me if I pronounce this wrong, but I want to say it was called Mansalona in Michigan, and she was charged with assault and disturbing the peace for throwing a cue ball at a bartender's head. Bullseye, right? Listen, a lot of stuff is going to happen, so I am going to flash forward to 1978 because from 76 to 78, it just seemed like she was getting in trouble all the time. All the time. When in 1978, Aileen was actually 22 years old, and she attempted suicide. And she did that by trying to get herself in the stomach. shoot herself in the stomach, I'm sorry. Now, this part is pretty sad. Between the ages of 14 and 22, Aileen actually tried to commit suicide 6 times. And with that, I just want to say that if you or you know of someone who is struggling with those types of thoughts, those types of feelings, reach out, you know, send resources, try to help, do anything you can. Do not stay silent, okay? It's not a joke, it's not a game, it's serious. It's an awful thing. Now, on May 26, 1981, she was arrested in Edgewater, Florida for the armed robbery of a convenience store. She stole $35 and 2 packs of smokes. Now, she was sentenced to prison on May 4th of 1982 and released on June 30th of 1983. I want to skip ahead here because she was just arrested constantly. It was like every other month. It was just kind of crazy. So in 1986, a 30-year-old Aileen met a 24-year-old named Tyra Moore. And Tyra was a hotel maid, and they actually met at a Daytona Beach gay bar called the Zodiac. They moved in together pretty quickly. There's no shock to hear that. And Aileen supported them from the money that she made hooking. On March 12th of 1988, Aileen actually accused a bus driver of assault and claimed that he pushed her off the bus following some sort of confrontation. And Tyra was listed as a witness for the incident. I think it's kind of, you know, evident with Aileen's history that she was extremely confrontational and volatile towards everyone, mainly men. I think Aileen just liked to look for a fight anywhere that she went. And when you mix that type of behavior with alcohol, it just kind of does not go well for anybody. When talking about Tyra, Aileen said, "It was a love beyond imagination. Earthly words cannot describe how I felt about Tyra." She even claimed that she was still in love with Tyra up until the point that she got executed. Now, down to the murders. Aileen murdered 7 men within a period of 12 months. All of these men were between the ages of 40 and 65, so she kind of had a type, if you would say, middle-aged men. I think she just didn't like middle-aged men because of the relationship that she had with her grandfather, and then the relationship she had with the man who assaulted her that was friends with her grandfather. I want to talk a little bit about these men. The first one that I want to get into would be Richard Mallory. He was 51 years old when he was murdered. And Mallory owned an electric store. Aileen claimed that he had beaten and raped her, and then that he also sodomized her when he drove them to an abandoned area to do you know what. He was her first victim, and she claimed that she killed him in self-defense. Now, at some point, though, he had been convicted for attempted rape in the state of Maryland. 2 days after the murder, which took place November 30th of 1989, a Volusia County deputy actually found Mallory's abandoned vehicle, and his body was found several miles away on December 13th. He had been shot several times. The thing that you will see with every murder, she used a .22 caliber pistol to shoot everyone. I actually will include a picture of the pistol because I want you to see what it looks like, because it's a weird looking gun. Like, it looks like an antique. David Spears was 47. He was found June 1st along US Route 19 in Citrus County, Florida. Next, we have Charles Carskadden, who was 40. He was murdered the 13th of May in 1990. His body was found on June 6th of 1990. Then we have Peter Seams, who left Florida in June of 1990 for a trip to Arkansas. He unfortunately never made it there, and on July 4th of 1990, his car was found in Orange Springs, Florida. Aileen and Tyra had actually been spotted abandoning his car, and the saddest part about that is that his body was never discovered, and it kind of leaves a lot of questions up in the air on that, especially in Florida, because my assumption about most things is that he would just get eaten by an alligator. But I could be wrong. I'm probably wrong. I don't know. There's a lot of alligators in Florida. Troy Burris was 50 years old. He was reported missing on the 31st of July in 1990, and then he was discovered August 4th of 1990. And then we have Charles Humphreys, who was 56. He was murdered September 11th of 1990. His body was found just the next day. And last but not least, we have Walter Gino Antonio. He was 62 when he was murdered, and that was on November 19th of 1990. He was discovered almost completely nude though. On January 9th of 1991, Aileen got arrested, and she was arrested on an outstanding warrant at a biker bar, actually, and that's called The Last Resort in Volusia County. You can actually go to this bar and get hot sauces that actually have pictures of her on them, and then it's kind of like I was looking at pictures of it, and it's just run down. I mean, it's definitely a biker bar. It's trashy, but it looks interesting. They definitely banked on the whole Aileen thing. When this happened, Tyra was actually located in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and it took a lot out of me not to use a Michael Scott quote on this when I read this the first time. Tyra actually agreed to elicit a confession from Aileen in order to have prosecution immunity. They put Tyra up in a hotel, all expenses paid, and along with police guidance, she made numerous calls to Aileen, pleading for help in clearing her name. You can actually hear the audio from this, and I don't know how I feel about it. I just think that Aileen and Tyra were both full of shit all the time. They were just liars. They lied about everything. 3 days later, after all this happened, Aileen confessed to these murders. That was January 16th of 1991. She claimed the men tried to rape her and she killed them in self-defense. But fast forward to January 14th of 1992, so a full year later basically, she went to trial for the murder of Richard Mallory. And on January 27th of 92, Aileen was convicted of his murder with help from Tyra's testimony. At the sentencing, psychiatrists for the defense testified that Aileen might not have been mentally stable, and they diagnosed her with borderline personality disorder. A lot of people just call that BPD. 4 days later, she was sentenced to death for the first time. On March 31st, Aileen pleaded no contest to the murders of Humphreys, Burris, and Spears, claiming she wanted to get right with God. And then on May 15th, Aileen was actually sentenced to 3 more death sentences. On May 15th, Aileen was actually given 3 more death sentences. And in November of 1992, she received her 5th death sentence. And then in February, she pled guilty to the killing of Walter Antonio, and shockingly was sentenced to death for the 6th time. Her stories about these killings were wildly inconsistent. Initially, she claimed that all 7 men had raped her as she was working as a prostitute. And later she recanted that claim of self-defense and just cited it as robbery and not wanting to leave any witnesses behind. Aileen made an appeal and it was denied in 1996. Years later, 2001, a petition was sent to the Supreme Court, and Aileen said that she wanted her legal counsel dismissed and all appeals terminated. She said, and you can find this quote online, there's videos of it, and because she did a lot of interviews, so you can find a lot of crazy things that she said, and I would suggest that you look them up because just the look that she has in her eyes, I think would make anyone uncomfortable. So Aileen said, "I killed those men. I robbed them cold as ice, and I would do it again tomorrow. There's no chance in keeping me alive or anything because Aileen Wuornos will kill again. I have hate crawling through my system. I am so sick of hearing this she's crazy shit. I've been evaluated many times. I'm competent, sane, and I'm trying to tell the goddamn truth. I seriously hate human life and I would kill again." Now, Aileen's attorneys argued that she was not mentally competent to make such a request, but a court-appointed panel of psychiatrists agreed that she knew what she was doing. Famously, she did several interviews. One instance, she actually turned on the interviewer, and the interviewer that she turned on, I believe, he actually did a documentary, and there's a few versions of it on YouTube that you can find. In one of the last interviews, when she was like losing her shit, she famously said, "You sabotaged my ass society, the cops, and the system. A raped woman got executed and was used for books and movies and shit." Her final on-camera words were, "Thanks a lot, thanks a lot, society, for railroading my ass." Her execution by lethal injection took place on October 9th of 2002. She declined an actual last meal and just opted for a cup of coffee. Eileen's last words before she was executed were, "Yes, I would like to say I'm sailing with the Rock and I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus on June 6th like the movie. Big mothership and all, I'll be back, I will be back." She took her last breath at 9:46 and died at 9:47 a.m. Wuornos was the second woman in Florida and the 10th in the United States to be executed since the 1976 U.S. Supreme Court decision restoring capital punishment. Now, her history just sucked. I just think that if she was raised differently, a lot of people would not have died. These men would not have been murdered. I think that the system failed her. I think her family failed her, especially her mom and her grandpa. He was a bastard. I feel bad for her in that sense. But then again, she was psychotic. She was absolutely insane. I think it's weird, as I was reading a lot about this, the fact that people idolize Aileen so much, because for one, you can't tell if she was falsely accusing these men of rape or whether or not she was just using it as an excuse because she's a woman. And I think there's a lot of things that can be talked about. I think this type of case opens up room for a lot of different discussion, healthy discussion. Anyway, hopefully if you're still here, your blondies, if you made them along with me, they should be coming out of the oven. Yeah, let's try our last meal. Hopefully it would do Aileen some justice. I would like to think that she would have enjoyed it if that's what she had eaten. So thanks, guys.